All right. Aloha, everyone. We'll just give it a moment here for people to log in. All right. Aloha, everyone, and thank you for joining the Hawaii IIBA chapter this afternoon. The board and community are really excited to have Deirdre Caren today to present the topic of business architecture. Deirdre is a director and founder at Agora Insights. We expect our largest turnout of the year, so I think this is a really great topic. We had over 60 registered attendees. It's particularly interesting for me. I work at Hawaiian Electric, and we're working on our enterprise process architecture, so I'm hoping that I can learn some new things here today. Also, I wanted to just say thank you to the Hawaii IIBA community. We had our AGM, our annual general meeting, and our Pauhana in August at Aloha Beer last month. We had our great turnout. We had over 40 attendees with also the Hawaii PMI chapter attending. Most importantly, we were able to raise over $400 for the Alzheimer's Association and a carload of food for the Maui Food Bank. So to stay up on date on future Hawaii chapter events, please check us out at hawaiiiiba.org. And with that, the floor is yours, Deirdre.
Thank you very much. All right, so welcome everyone. I think New Zealand would say kia ora. It's great to have you here. I'm going to talk about business architecture today, and I'm very passionate about this. So those who know me or seen me on LinkedIn or have taken any of the courses, we do offer certification training for business analysts and business architects, as well as really help business analysts in their transition to business architecture, but also looking at how do we deliver actual things to different companies. So I have thousands of students, probably about 11,000, maybe 12,000 now, from 94 countries to be specific. There is a huge growth, probably about 45% of those have transitioned into architecture. There's a huge growth in the field, and we work with lots of different companies. I'm a trainer at Stanford University, Salesforce, one of our clients, and we're in Canada at the moment to support some of our learners. So that's a little bit about us. Of course, you can find more on our website if you're interested. So where to start? Now, just to let you know that this structure, I will be taking you through the various components of what we do as business architects. So I just want to give you some context first. And then I'm going to show you some architecture and really that is to help you understand why we use architecture. So let me get through a little bit of the theory first, and then we'll get into some fun stuff, do a little bit of AI and show you a bit of a video and talk through some of the benefits that you'll have with architecture. For those who don't know, all businesses have architecture, and not all businesses have been architected. This is quite an important concept, actually, because you'll know that if a house has just been built, let's say by a couple of mates and they're blokes, it's quite different from having an architect come in and design the house to ensure that it's well structured, it's been done correctly. But it's still even if somebody has built the house with their family, that's still considered architecture. It's just not maybe pretty. Now, I do talk about the topic of digital transformation. I talk about digital enhancement and digitization. And to start off this conversation, I just want to explain the differences. So when we talk about digitization, this is taking something that, let's say, used to be a piece of paper and converting that to a PDF. That's digitization. So When we have digitization projects, we often are just doing very simple things and simple changes. And of course, we'll use IT and various other tools. When we talk about digital enhancements, this is where we take in processes and we're automating them, and we're taking things that we do in our normal business environment and we do them better. But digital transformation is when we change our business operating model. And to liken that to a house, it would mean that we're not just, swapping out, let's say, the kitchen appliances. We actually are redesigning the house itself. And so I like to use the example of reno shows. I always think that it's a great option. And so this is my hobby. I love to watch those shows where you go through this process of changing your house and renovating it after years of using it, and things evolving and things changing so that you can make it look great again. And so similarly, in our organizations, we look at multiple ways to not only design a business, so you can start off from a startup, but for most architects, we look at designing our businesses or redesigning our businesses to be more appropriate. So when you think of business architecture, you need to think of the holistic view that we have. So even though we understand small parts, we also understand what the overarching view of the organization is. The reality in our business is that your systems, your processes, how things connect to each other often looks like this. It's nasty. And what happens is that often there'll be hey, we just need to improve that little box there, and the interconnection is not well understood. It's not, we might be changing one thing in one business area and it affects another business area. So the reality is, if we were to take a diagram of a house and show that to a client, and we showed all the pipes, all of the let's say, it could be sewage, it could be water, it could be electrics, it could be plumbing. If we were to show all of that in a diagram of a house, it would be very difficult for that person to see what the house looks like. So with architecture, what we try to do is create viewpoints and visualizations so that businesses can, reorganize what they want to do. So this picture is going to be quite important in understanding why we do the designs that we do, and architecture is about design, and how do we simplify some of the complexity that we have in IT, how we deliver into our customers, why we deliver into our customers, etc. So let's look at some principles of business architecture. So architecture is about the business. Everything about the business that you have is what we do with architecture. We're not focused on IT, which is a tool that we use. We're not focused on particular processes. We want to understand the big picture. We want to be able to bring it down to a visualization where the business understands all of the components, but understand the complexity behind those visualizations so that there's simplicity and clarity. Often people say with good design, you don't even notice it. You walk into the house, it's just well designed. You can look at it and you like it. For bad design, you're usually knocking into things and getting frustrated as to how it works. Business architecture scope is the scope of the business, the entire business. The business architecture is not prescriptive. In other words, you don't have to do step 1, then step 2, then step 3, and follow some kind of formula. We use things in regular ways, just like when a building architect designs a house. They don't design it like they did the previous house. They design it appropriately within context. And BABOK talks about that too, understanding the context when you look at Beckham, for instance. What is the context that the organization is working in? Business architecture is iterative, as you can imagine, with digital transformation, as I mentioned, and enhancements and digitization. There are lots of things that change over time, and we'd have to work with the business to really understand what those might be. And business architecture is reusable. Business architecture is not about deliverables. So I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but an important component is you have to think of a building architect. So when a building architect, they're not going to be picking up the bricks and starting to lay each brick. The builder and the team are really there to do the, let's call it, boots on the ground part of building. So that would often be your solution requirements, your business analysts, your project manager. These roles are often involved in getting that done. Whereas in business architecture, it's it's just like the building architect would then look at what do you need to do in order to be able to deliver. So business analysts, I often say business analysts are boots on the ground. So what we do is we take narrow part of information, detail around our business, and we explore it. So what are the requirements? What does this look like? And we deep dive into specific things about our organization. So as I showed you this image, you can imagine business analysts would look at particular projects and initiatives and systems and maybe do some integration with it, but typically it would be a deep dive of a particular component. Whereas with business architecture, we try see the holistic big picture. So we want to understand, oh, well, actually, there's 10 projects that are basically doing the same thing. And why are they doing that? Are they different? Are they the same? How does that all work and come together? So the difference between a business analyst and a business architect is around depth and breadth. And this is quite an important concept to understand, that a business architect needs to look broadly, needs to understand if you do that initiative and you change in, that CRM particular thing, whatever it might be that you're busy doing in the organization, there's likely to be an impact somewhere else. And for obviously business architects would need business analysts as well to really understand and do the analysis. I've always said, often in projects, we forget that the role of a BA is to analyze. And so what business architects do is they provide knowledge. We call it a knowledge base around the broad aspects of the business. And then the business analyst would then go and inspect particular aspects of the business. So we spoke about, and I don't have that particular diagram I want to show you yet, but actually, I'll just quickly skip for a minute. So imagine it like this. Your architect would be building a library, we call it a knowledge base, of all of the components, and we do that conceptually. Another very important concept, we're not trying to do all the physical modeling. If you go into BABOK, you'll see the difference. We conceptually draw the house, just like an architect who's designing your house gives you a picture. It's not an actual house. It's actually just a picture of a house. And so similarly, we're not actually building IT or those type of things. We are conceptually designing all of the components of the business. Whereas the business analyst is looking at specific sections of information in order to help the business make decisions. So we look at both business architects and business analysts are about building knowledge for the organization. So organization often has a lot of data, not always good data, but has a lot of data. We have lots of information as well. It could be policies, it could be projects, it could be various other things. But what we try to do is we try to provide the knowledge that's required for the business to make decisions. And so the business architect would look at the broad sense, the library version of the knowledge, and make recommendations in terms of strategies, what initiatives should be done, why are those initiatives more important than other initiatives, for instance. Whereas your business analyst would also be providing knowledge around very specific things. What requirements do we need? How are we going to deliver to a specific project at a specific time? Why does this project matter? So they're very closely aligned. It's just the type of information that you're sharing is different. I also think that for business architects, we focus a lot on the design element. And for those who have studied BABOK, you'll know that we talk about requirements and designs interchangeably. Whereas I would say almost your BA is looking more at the requirements element of the designs, and the BARC is looking at the overarching design element. So what is the role of a business architect? Well, your business architect looks from a macro level, and this is really the high level overview of what BARCs do. They would establish principles and governing policies over interaction with suppliers, etc. At a strategic level, now the macro level is what I'm talking about when I talk about a knowledge base, understanding overarching, what does this house look like, understanding all the parts of the house, not necessarily the choices that certain individuals have made, like, for instance, again, conceptual design. So a architect won't necessarily know that you chose, let's say, a Miele kitchen, but knows that there is a oven in a specific part of your house. So at a macro level, we look at the knowledge base, we look at understanding our capabilities, we look at understanding our information concepts and our business units. And then at a strategic level, and this is often where TOGAF would bring in certain components of business architecture. And this is also where a lot of BAs get it wrong, just highlighting this. At a strategic level, we would look to target certain capabilities. So we already understand how our organization is structured. We already have the knowledge base, which is our library of all the components of our organization and our design. And then we'd work with the executives to understand, what are we trying to achieve as an organization? What's at the strategic level? Here we'd look at policies, we'd look at the current state of the organization, understand the environment, understand and contextually rationalize what is happening within that environment. At a program level, which is really looking at the strategic side down to the initiatives. Now, initiatives, remember, are not necessarily projects. It is a goal that we want to achieve, and a project or several projects could come out of an initiative. And so this is where the business architect may help, deliver some of those initiatives and understand the overall impact that it would have within the organization. And typically at the lowest level, which is the delivery level, this is where there's a strong engagement with your business analyst or your product owner, depending on how, if you're using agile methodologies or those kind of things. And the main purpose is understanding that the project that's being promoted and being delivered is aligned with your business architecture. And so supporting the business in that way. So hopefully that makes sense. So you're doing quite a few things, which it's very similar to what you were doing in business analysis. So we look not only to have all of our core architectural knowledge base intact, but we also look to help build the strategy, use the architecture components that we have in place, and we might have to, create things from a derivative approach if we don't have everything straight away. And we'd look at actionable results or requirements, I like to say, in order to deliver to the project. So quite simply, our business requirements, our business architecture consists of these main parts. We have capabilities. I'll go into more detail on all of these components after I've given you a demonstration. We have value streams, we have information concepts, we have organizational, which consists of business units, we have stakeholders, products, initiatives, strategies, policies, and metrics. And that all fits into our knowledge base. This is what we want to know about the organization. And we have different ways of visualizing these outputs and diagrams. So it really does depend on what the organization is looking for. I showed you this one before. Now, I want to show you in action. If you have a business architecture knowledge base, and I've only chosen 3 aspects of the business architecture. So I've chosen capabilities, organization, and stakeholders. So I've gone into the library and I've pulled out and I've said, want to understand this. I have then uploaded that information. I've also uploaded company information, in other words, the vision, the mission, the philosophy, etc. of the organization, because we want to understand the context, really important Backham understanding. And I've asked it to create a requirements container. So it's like taking out a book from the library. And the requirements container, I won't go into too much detail because we just don't have the time, but the requirements container is a matching of our capabilities to the information that's stored within our library. So it's like taking out a book on a topic or taking out a set of books on a topic. And so I've asked it to create a requirements container for brand management, because the organization is looking to change their brand identity. So that's what they're focusing on, from a brand identity. So now it's created all of our architectural concepts. So from levels 1 all the way through, it's highlighted what business units would be involved and what stakeholders would be involved. And now I've said create 20 user stories from that. It has got traceability. Now, this is obviously what we've trained our bot to do, but it has traceability. So tier 1, level 1, capability 1, user story 001. And so it's created a user story based on the knowledge base that we have. So it is making certain assumptions. And for those who have studied BABOK will know that we have atomic requirements. So the difference, what this would do is that we understand the building. We are not walking around as BAs trying to understand what the owners of the house want, how they want things, and trying to gather requirements. We are using the knowledge that we have from the architecture to understand what our requirements user stories would be. Obviously, we still have to do solution requirements. So it's given me a set. So the AI is really helpful in this sense. We've got our traceability, we've got our user story. And so now I've asked it to create acceptance criteria for one of the user stories. and it has created the acceptance criteria, and all of this has just been from our architectural knowledge base. Obviously, we can add more, and this is where an analyst or a business architect, depending on the level of the project that you're working in, will have to validate and verify all of this information to ensure that this information aligns with what they're wanting to do in the project. But it certainly does help. So now we'll have things around the logo, the color palettes, the guidelines, and we'll trace it down to each user story. So in our architecture, we'll have one capability and multiple user stories, but they will only be used once. Now I've asked it to create functional requirements, and it is now tracing those requirements, the functional requirements, to the acceptance criteria. And I like to say this has all been done in 8 minutes. So these are important concepts to understand, that our architecture has fueled this information, not that we're trying to find information. The architecture concepts and blueprints that we've created has done that. All right, let me just skip that. So here we've got, sorry, I just skipped a little bit. We've got our non-functional requirements. Now, AI wasn't really good at that because it really focused on the system. So this is where BAs and BRs need to understand the profession, the rules, how things are working. Bots aren't going to do that for you just yet. So you're still all right. So I've asked it to go beyond system requirements and look at non-functional requirements. It's done a really, really good job. Of course, you'll still have to validate. And then I asked for transitional requirements based on the traced requirement. And I'm just going to go a little bit back. So your transitional requirements are things like current brand guidelines document and assets should be reviewed and consolidated before migrating, etc. So AI is really smart, but you have to feed it with good information. And so that's super helpful. And then I've taken the requirements container. I've asked for another 20 unique user stories, which it has created, and it has looked at the profiles that we have in our architecture to create these user stories. So again, it's done some good traceability. It understands how to link that. This obviously is something we've trained it to do, but it's super helpful. Now I've asked it to create value stream, which is an architectural concept based on our requirement set. So this is like a high-level process. It isn't a process. I'm just using that for simplicity explanation, but it's a high-level objective of what we want to achieve as an organization. So now it's said, these are the stakeholders, these are the value stream stages, like the steps, and these are the supporting capabilities that we'd need to be able to deliver to the brand, which is great. I've now asked it to cross-map this value stream, think of it like a process with the user stories. So it was pretty good at that. Did take a few minutes to do it. And so each stage of the value stream, so we're developing a brand strategy, has now assigned requirements, user stories. So it said at these stages, you should consider this. Now, as architects, we would go and measure this out a little bit further because we might want to bring in more capabilities and more user stories. But it gives us a good starter for 10. And so now I've said, all right, estimate how long this project would take and consider various things, particularly the number of stakeholders. So it has suggested that we have if there were 10 core stakeholders, how long it would take to do the brand initiative, if there were 20 core stakeholders, and if there were 40 core stakeholders. Now, this is quite important because for BAs, we often need to know how many people are involved. So architecture, we should have the stakeholder list up front, but we'll make some assumptions based on the scale of the project and the context of the project. And then I asked her to create, to only use the first one. So we're assuming that there are 10 core stakeholders. And I've asked it to look at those 10 and provide an estimate of the tasks, what work would need to be done in order to deliver to this particular initiative. And so as we went through that, it has now said the brand manager would have to do these key tasks. And that's an estimate of the time that it would take them to do that. Training team, sales team, customer service, product team, etc. So super, super helpful, giving us some estimates. And if you understand with business analysis, we do have to make assumptions, right? But we want to make educated assumptions. So this is really just helping us make better assumptions. And then I've asked it to create a roadmap. So it's using the knowledge that I've fed it from an architectural point of view to make these assumptions that are contextually appropriate for the knowledge base that I've submitted. So it's now saying phase 1 would be this, phase 2 would be that, phase 3 would be that. These should be the initiative goals, and these should be the primary stakeholders as what was discussed earlier. And I liked it. I thought it was super helpful. So I think that has been a great way to demonstrate the value of business architecture and the interaction with business analysis. If you have any questions, now's a great time to ask. I'm just going to, close that out. All right. So next, let's look at the reality of what business analysts face. This is on BA Day last year, which is on the 1st of November every year. And the description was a business analyst is someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data by those with questionable knowledge. And Daniel just had a nice visit with him yesterday, finally, in person. Sounds less accurate if a decent business architecture practice was in place to assist business analysts and their description of requirements, epics, and user stories. So I thought that was a really appropriate way to, understand that a little bit better. So as business analysts, we typically do these 10 things. I always say for BAs, you need to understand your 10 core things that you do. You understand the background of the project, the problem or the opportunity that the organization is facing, the critical success factors, the root cause analysis, hopefully, the stakeholders. There's some references to BABOK, by the way, in terms of the dates, the current state, the business requirements down right through to the solution requirements, depending, you might use functional consultants or somebody else, the future state, the cost to benefit, so the value that you are delivering, and the next steps or a business case or something along those lines, depending on how your organization is structured in terms of its delivery. And so that's what we typically do. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty manual process. You go into every organization and every project. It can be very challenging for everybody. But with architecture, we can speed this entire process up. Just go and click on that button. We can speed this process up by using the knowledge base to really understand some of the core components. So what are we having a Miele kitchen? But we don't need to understand everything, but we need to understand some specifics. So from an architectural point of view, we'll typically take strategy, we'll take the initiative, the BA will analyze, that's their job, right? But you'll use the artifacts that have been created through the business architecture to speed this whole process up. So what will take, we often use the case, what usually would take you 4 months would take about a week if you had a good architecture in place to really speed up that process. And architecture doesn't have to take long to do. It depends on how much detail you want. But it will certainly speed this process up, even with less detail than you may want. So I'm sure I'm just making assumptions because you with the IIBA chapter, you've seen we've got business requirements, stakeholder requirements. I just use user requirements. Solution requirements, transitional, non-functional, and functional requirements. Now, often with our projects, we just start here in solution requirements. It's really not ideal. We don't really understand the business goals, the objectives. And so what happens is business capabilities are actually provide us with these goals. We don't have to try discover them. Business architecture actually is structured to already have those business goals at that level available. We also struggle to find stakeholders. Who's the right person to talk to? When should we talk to them? Do a stakeholder analysis, set up a meeting, etc. I'm sure you know how it is. And so with stakeholders, we look to analyze stakeholders early. We look to have that information available and to make some decisions, not on the actual job titles, but on the roles that they play. So we look at RESCI and we look at the stakeholder kind of high-level model, again, depending on how much. So you can start your solution requirements because you have your architecture in place, which is giving you these 2 layers of requirements. So as business architects, where I said business architecture is not about deliverables, it's this space that's about the deliverables. And often what happens in projects, we do all these deliverables and they don't actually lead to anything because it's not anchored in an architecture. So now you can do it because you've got access to the architecture, which is helpful. I do see a question. Curious to know what AI tools you're using. It's not ChatGPT and it's not Bard. It's Claude 2, which is through Anthropic. And it's one we use in Agora. It's not publicly shared, but I will show you some publicly available stuff for BAs doing their certification. We've created some personalized bots for you to use to learn more about business analysis. All right, so alternatives to business architecture. What happens if you decide not to use architecture and you're not totally interested in what business architecture has to offer? So let's look at process modeling. So if we do process modeling, there is a focus on the operational efficiency using flowcharts, diagrams, and representing activities. We in architecture call this a volatile concept. So anything that describes how we do business could change, tomorrow again, because our technology changes so quickly, our processes change, etc. So the limitation is it lacks a holistic view of the organization, the plan, the blueprint. that considers both the strategic objectives, alignment, and the I've used an example here, which is critical to Supreme Coffee, which is the case I just showed you. So strategic planning and management. So you can do a strategy. Remember that nasty diagram I showed you in the beginning. So here you would do things like SWOT, balance scorecard, multiple strategic tools. It could be a business model canvas, multiple things. And they often recommend all of these things to BAs. But as I said, anything in isolation that isn't anchored is just a nice to have. It's not giving you a holistic view. So it aims to define and track strategic objectives, which is great. But the limitation is it may miss nuances of operational alignment, particularly around maintaining, in the case that I showed you, the brand's reputation for high quality coffee, etc. Project management. So if your changes are all focused on project management, which is how, again, a volatile concept. So project management is great and it should be used. But it gives you the oversight of specific projects and programs, and it's useful for managing specific changes or transitions. But the limitation is that without the business architecture framework, it may not consider the broader business context and strategic alignment, potentially leading to disjointed project outcomes. So I don't know how many of you have experienced where projects, you kind of look at it and you go, but that project's doing the same thing as we are. And this is where architecture can help you with your user stories, because if you can track a user story from one project to another project, you can see that there's actually a misalignment. So for most organizations, we focus on change and digital transformation, particularly using project management as our overarching approach, which can be dangerous. If you're looking at enterprise IT architecture now, there are several models. We have DODAF, we have TOGAF, we have Zachman, we have, try to remember the rest, but there are a few frameworks, and I like to explain the difference. So you might be a business analyst working in Agile, you might be a business analyst working in a more predictive approach like waterfall, but you're still a business analyst and you still know what you do. For most enterprise frameworks, those are particular ways of working. But to be a business architect, you need to be able to work in multiple frameworks like enterprise architecture. But if you are not focusing on the business architecture side of enterprise architecture, you do not inherently capture things outside of IT. This is a big, big problem because often, and I use the case of Supreme Coffee, often if you are a business trying to franchise, there's lots of other things that we have to consider, like policies, like a product catalog. So although they might be stored in IT, often there's a focus on ensuring that we have our systems working, just like the bot, went for solution architecture, for systems requirements, rather than looking at a more holistic type of requirement. Okay, so I've reached kind of the end. At the moment, we have these, let me just check the time. Yeah, I think it's more or less. We have 3 architectural programs. This one's a live program, which will take you from step 1, so it's 10 days, 10 half days. Take you from business architecture through to requirements. So we'll look at, firstly, how to create architecture. Then first 3 days. Next 3 days, we'll look at how to do a strategy for an organization. And you're expected to do your own strategy, and we'll use our bot. And then the last 3 days, well, days 6 to 9, I think. 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 7, 8, 9 will be your requirements and delivering business cases. And then the last day will be around reflection. So that's one of it. We do have a certification course, and we do also have a very light course, which we have to rejig using our new model because ChatGTP changed too much and was unstable. But we do have that course available as well. So this is if you want to get certified and you want to shift over to business architecture. Now, I do just want to highlight one very, very, very important fact, which I mentioned, but I brushed over, was we talk about capabilities. Now, BABOK describes capabilities really well, but doesn't visualize capabilities well. Can anyone tell me what they understand by capabilities? And I know people get nervous in these sessions, but what is a capability in an organization? If there's a text box anyway. Let me just go ahead. So this was the most difficult thing for me to understand when I shifted into architecture, because I'd been in a process world for a very, very long time where we spoke about how does this process work and how does that work, and processes, like I said, are very useful when you transitioning current to future state, when you're training people around how to do something, and if you want to automate things. Those are really, really helpful ways in which to use processes to help you. Capabilities, on the other hand, are what we do as an organization. They shouldn't change. And this is what we call a stable business architectural component. So just as a house, when we are working with business or we're designing a house, those walls shouldn't change much. They should be stable. They are part of our architecture of how we build things. And so when you think like a business architect, you want to understand, what will we do in the next 10 years? And a simple example is McDonald's offers fast food. How they deliver their fast food, how their menus have worked has changed, but their brand, their approach, their reputation, their structure, their franchising, what they do hasn't changed much over the last few years. So you have to think completely differently. I often say to business analysts, especially senior business analysts who transition into business architecture, that you have to stop thinking like an analyst to really learn architecture. And only once you've learned architecture, then you can bring your analyst mind back to be able to really use the skills that you've obtained. It can be quite difficult for a lot of people to understand those concepts. So it's really important that you understand the difference between business analysis, I suppose, and business architecture, concepts like capabilities. If you were to want to explore architecture, start there. Start with understanding what a capability is. Now, BABOK uses terms like project management as a capability. It's incorrect. So the definition of a capability in BABOK is correct. In chapter 6 of BABOK, there's a reasonably good definition of capabilities versus processes that you can use, but the actual diagram that's being displayed isn't accurate according to business architecture. So just those who are using that as a reference, rather go look at some of the free references that we have. Go look at what the Business Architecture Guild does, for instance, to define capabilities, which are what we do, not how we do things. So project management isn't a capability for McDonald's. A capability for McDonald's is being able to manage products and to manage customers and to manage franchisees. those are capabilities, but project management is just the way in which we do things. So if you were to take anything and you want to go to the next level, try look to understand capabilities. We do have resources available to help you with that. And I think that's the end.
All right, thank you so much, Deirdre. I do have one question in chat, and if there's other questions, feel free to put those in. There was a question on what is your opinion for BIZBOK and their associated resources like industry reference models for capabilities.
BizBook's really good with reference models. I advise everyone to use it. So particularly for your capabilities, I do think that you need to understand your own context. So just like with everything, if you're going to generalize, overly generalize your organization, you're not going to be able to really get the nuances of your organization. So for instance, if you were looking at, let's say, a McDonald's versus a coffee shop that was all green and, you know, uses vegan food and that, which is quite different, let's say, from McDonald's. Your capabilities and your reference models give you a generalized view, for example, generalized view of a retail organization, which is really super helpful, but you'll have to provide it with some context to make it very specific for your business. So business architects need to use those resources. Absolutely. They're really good. They'll help you with AI as well, but you have to ensure that you have the right context in which you're using them, not just words for words' sake, because your bot's not going to give you quality outputs if you are using it to help build your capability models.
All right. Were there any other questions out there? If not, I can help close this. I don't know if you had anything else, Deirdre.
No, the only one thing I wanted to say, if you could go to our website, we do have learning bots to help you prepare for your exams. They're really cute. They're free. You'll find the link on our pages. So if you are preparing for your exams, so this isn't a BIOC bot, by the way, it's just to help you. But if you are preparing for your exams, you can use that to help you. And we've programmed it with some rules around how to prepare for your exams.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'll check that out. I just want to extend a big mahalo to Deirdre with Agora Insights for presenting today. Business process architecture was a very popular topic for our community, and it was a great presentation this afternoon. It's amazing to see AI used to develop requirements. So it's a little scary. I knew it could write code, but I didn't think about requirements. So that's something to ponder over the weekend. Also, thank you all for attending today's webinar. Expect a Zoom follow-up email with a link to the recording. Last but not least, just enjoy your Aloha Friday wherever you are, and also enjoy your weekend. Please stay tuned for future Hawaii IIBA chapter events. Check us out on our website or just watch our newsletter. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you very much.